Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I did something I don't do very often with my family last week. I took them all to a concert, a big fancy show at an arena with loud music and live performance and an artist that I have always wanted to see perform, somebody I've looked up to and liked for a really long time, and I'm not going to tell you who it was. Which is weird. I know, I'm teasing it. There's a point to all of this. The reason I'm not telling you is because we're putting out, like maybe right now, maybe it's already out. I don't know as you're hearing this. But we're putting out an episode on No Dumb Questions, the two dudes talking show that I do with my buddy Destin. And it's about the concert. And I don't want to ruin it because I met the artist afterwards with my son. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty meaningful. And that's what the episode's about. So I'm not going to spoil it with who we went to see, but it was awesome. And what kind of amazed me about the show, beyond just how great it was and how impressive it was that this artist could do all these things I've heard them do for all these years, that they could do it live, what impressed me was the operation. I got a little bit of a look at the bowels of the arena and what it takes to put on a show. I mean, this is like a 3-hour event where you've got these two artists, an opener, and then the main act up on the stage. It's maybe 3 hours. And there is a massive crew that obviously comes with the musicians, but there's a massive crew that makes the event go. Concessions and maintenance and security and tickets. And there were just shirts everywhere that said, you know, we work here, staff or whatever. It was wild to think that a 3-hour event has that much planning, that much effort, that many man hours that go into making it happen. And years from now, when I think back on this show, I'm probably only going to picture the main artist. Maybe I'll remember the opening act. I definitely won't picture the faces of any of the hundreds of people behind the scenes that were required, though, to make this really impressive but very short event happen. Likewise, when you picture the Bible, there are a bunch of really big names of authors and people who wrote the Bible, like Moses and Luke and Paul and John. But as we're seeing here in passages like Galatians 6:11 that says, "See what large letters I use as I write to you with my own hand." That's Paul saying that. We have these moments where we have the curtain pulled back a little bit and we realize, dang, there's like a whole cast and crew behind the Bible that made this go. There's all these people whose names we don't know, we don't remember, they're hinted at, we can tell they were involved, but we don't know who they are. And it's just an indicator of how God built the Bible. So the Bible holds itself out as being inspired by God, but overtly written by people, which means the fingerprints of God are all over the Bible. The internal cohesiveness, the theological consistency, the accuracy, the reliability, but also the fingerprints of humanity are all over the thing. I mean, you just spent all this time in Galatians with me. It's very human. Paul is clearly a part of this writing process. So it's not like God, man, I don't want to venture into like blasphemy or anything here, but I don't know. I'm just going to try to say what I'm trying to say here. It's not like God possessed Paul and took over his will and his personality, like had a human puppet, and he moved Paul around and made him seem like he was a person, but he was actually just possessed by God. This sounds so dark and weird. Sorry. I think I'm maybe not even supposed to say this stuff. It's so wrong, but that just isn't what the Bible holds itself out as doing at all. I mean, the personalities of all the characters are on display. The meticulousness of Luke is on display. The detail-oriented older recollections of Peter, I think, probably are coming through in Mark. The gentleness and grandfatherliness of old man John is coming through in the Johannine epistles. That's a really fancy way of saying the letters that John wrote. So the Bible, both what it claims about itself, what we know from history, and what it shows itself to be internally, is very incarnational. Just like God took on flesh in the person of Christ Jesus, so also the Bible kind of takes on flesh. It's human, and it's from God, and it's reliable, and it's superintended to do exactly what God wants it to do, using human genres, using human methods and structures of writing that writings are built out of to be created. For example, you got Psalms. Well, it's not like one guy sat down and wrote Psalms. There were a lot of songs that a lot of people wrote about God that were all really, really good during that time. But at some point, the editorial process of picking which ones of these songs would make it into the collection was Christians believe, Jews believe it was guided by God. It's exactly the right list. Nailed it. Great job. The Proverbs. Well, lots of people wrote the Proverbs. We know several of the authors' names. Some of them, probably many of them, we don't know who wrote them. They were collected by somebody who did the curating on all of this. I mean, it says the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David. So at least some of these are overtly by Solomon. Maybe the rest are gathered by him, but we don't know. There's ambiguity to it. Well, I think that's kind of cool, because how else would a collection of proverbs or songs happen? At other times, you've got genealogies, you've got letters, you've got books of prophecy that are mingled with narrative. Luke, for example, tells us exactly how he wrote Luke and then the story of the early church, Acts. He says, I just went and asked people. I used historical methods to figure out what was actually going on here. Well, the audience would have wanted to know that, because Luke wasn't an eyewitness to the events of the life of Jesus. He would have had to have done research. So the Bible, my point is, the Bible is never shy about exactly what it is at every turn. And yet somehow, while being completely forthright about how it was made and showing that it was made, it also absolutely claims to be from God. And somehow there's this union of the superintendence of an all-powerful, all-knowing God with the fumbling and groping around of humanity. At certain points it intersects and it creates this document. Now look, the best argument I have for the reliability of the Bible is an internal argument. If you take the time to do what we're doing right now, it holds up. And I'll tell you this straight up. I am more sure of the reliability and truth of the Bible now than when you and I met. I think it more now than when I started this podcast. And I think I really thought it hard when I started this podcast, but I've just seen so much in these years with you. Nothing else I've ever read, and I've read great material, the best material from human history. None of it hangs together like this. And all that great material I've read from human history, it was all written by like one guy at one time in one sitting. This shouldn't work. It shouldn't hang together the way it does with all these authors over all this time and with all these people behind the scenes who we don't, like the cast and crew who we don't even see or know, but who get alluded to from time to time, like what we see here toward the end of Galatians. It just shouldn't work so well, and it does. And then you also consider like the external evidence and stuff. And I don't know, I'm very, very compelled by the Bible, obviously, because I want to talk with you about it every single day. And I think it's super interesting. Also, I don't think it's magic. And this is a passage that reminds me of why I don't think it's magic. I don't think this is a book that just descended from heaven. It's frustrating. There's certain threads of Christianity that like to pick fights with other threads of Christianity. And sometimes they'll throw this out as some dumb straw man pejorative toward people kind of from my part of the Christian family tree. Like, you people think that it just came down from heaven one day. No, we don't. It's in the text. We can tell where it came from. We're not idiots. You can read the Bible and figure out where the Bible came from. It gives you a pretty good sense of how it was made. It isn't magic. It's bigger than that. It's more important and more impressive than magic. It's superintended by a God who is held out as being bigger than earth and reality and nature and existence as we think of those things, giving him the ability to do something that is really approachable and really readable, that a person could make sense of, and that's full of relatable human experience, and that was composed and written in a way where if you sat and thought about it, you'd be like, I guess that'd be how you'd have to write something like that. It's completely understandable, relatable, and approachable, but also there's every page smacks of the stuff of the divine, something that is so, so, so much bigger. So I love it when we get these little break the fourth wall, pull back the curtain moments of the Bible. If you've been hanging out with me for any amount of time, you know that I think this stuff is awesome because I highlight it all the time. And I love that. My conviction is this: the God of existence, I am himself, ordained that Paul would be the kind of guy who would respond to Galatia just this way and the problem there. And then he'd be the kind of guy who at the end of this letter is like, give me the pen. Give me just, no, I'm serious. I can get this part. I'm fine. I can see well enough. Give me the pen. And then he takes the pen and he writes down basically the whole gist of the letter he just got done doing, but only in like 5 or 6 sentences to just make sure you got it and that you saw it in Paul's own handwriting. And I love that dance between those two things, the the very temporal and the very human, and also the supernatural, because the way the Bible is made in that dance is, in that way, it's exemplary of, it's demonstrative of the very relationship between me and God, humanity and God. You sit around and you think to yourself, well, how could there ever be union or any kind of right standing or any relationship between the infinite and the finite? Just when you really stop and think about it, that seems like it would be impossible. And then you pick up the Bible and it's all kind of one big answer to that question. Well, I guess like this. I guess this is a little glimpse into what it might look like for there to be a relationship between the infinite and the finite. The infinite's going to do the heavy lift, but the finite isn't just snuffed out in the midst of all of this. It's redeemed. It's made useful. It's given purpose. It's made an agent and an heir, not just something passive. And so there's an old saying, I got to wrap this up. I've been going too long, but there's an old saying, the medium is the message. The idea is that how a thing is communicated, or the medium by which a thing is communicated, is a big part of what is being communicated. And I think that's true with the Bible. When you really look at the guts of it, the nuts and bolts of it, the little peeks behind the curtain like we get in Galatians 6:11, see what large letters I use as I write to you with my own hand, a passage like that, that kind of stuff teaches. That kind of stuff is part of what the point of the Bible is. That is, the nature of the Bible is modeling the hope that the Bible overtly talks about on its pages and overtly in the words that are written down as well. Doesn't that make sense? Oh, it was fun for me to process that through anyway. Once again, if you want to know what cool artist I've always wanted to meet, who I met and went to this concert, you can check out Notum Questions. We'll link it below. It's not like I even get anything for this. Like, it's not like there's some great big call to action. I just think you might get a kick out of it, and I don't want to ruin it because I think it's a great episode that I recorded with my buddy about that. So I'm just not going to tell you here. You can check that out if you want to. Either way, we are moving forward into Paul's really big, important restatement and wrap-up stuff. That's going to be one great final check for you and me to make sure we got Galatians and it's in our hip pocket before we wrap this thing up and move on to the next season, which is Philemon. All right, that's plenty for now. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.